They removed my chair. That's how it started. Not a firing, not an email, just one Monday morning, I walked in and found my ergonomic mesh-backed chair, the one I'd bought myself during our ramen noodle startup days, replaced with a plastic conference room reject that wobbled when you breathed near it. No note, no explanation, just silence. Like someone had quietly erased a part of me and expected me not to notice. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so them. I was the one who built the back end in my garage when the company was 3 people and a Google Doc. I was the one who figured out how to make our software HIPAA compliant in 48 hours before that investor demo in year 1. I was the one who stayed up until 3 a.m. debugging a permissions leak no one else even noticed. But sure, let's pretend this was about chairs now. The new girl, Carly, 24 and permanently perched on the edge of someone else's desk like a Labrador in lip gloss, walked by with a green smoothie and chirped, "Oh, they must be streamlining again." Then she turned on her heel and pranced into a meeting I wasn't invited to. Another one. Listen, before we get too deep, can I ask you a quick favor? If you're enjoying this kind of story, just click the subscribe button and give it a like. I know, everyone says it, but 90% of folks listening never subscribe, and it honestly keeps the team caffeinated and off the ledge. All right, back to the disaster. The company didn't always feel like this. Back then, we had 6 folding tables, a shared Slack password, and dreams so big they cracked drywall. I was Melissa from engineering. No one called me Melissa in tech or Melissa in backend. I was just Melissa, co-founder in everything but LinkedIn titles. My name was on the articles of incorporation. In the early days, we wore too many hats, tripped over power cords, and prayed our AWS credits wouldn't run out. But there was something sacred about it. We were building something real. Then came the daughter. Avery, the founder's little princess who once spilled kombucha on our first prototype and said, why does it look like a calculator from the 90s? Back then, she was just a guest, home from college, taking selfies in front of our whiteboards and calling it content. Fast forward 2 years and she's Chief Vision Officer. No, seriously, that's her title. Vision Officer. Like she's the Oracle of Delphi with a marketing degree from a party school. And somehow, every week she gathered more gravity, hosting these strategic huddles that looked like cult meetings for brand consultants, complete with mood boards and LED candles. I stopped getting invites right around the time she rebranded our dashboard into something that looked like a Pinterest board for toddlers. But I kept my head down. I thought I could outlast her. I thought competence still mattered. I was wrong. The chair was just the start. They moved my desk next, out of the main bullpen and into a corner near the printer, between the intern's locker and the mop closet. Suddenly, I was out of range of the whiteboard, the coffee chats, the war room. Out of sight, out of strategy. The founder, Avery's dad, tried to soften it. We're just decentralizing, Mel, giving teams more ownership. But I saw the way his eyes darted toward the glass office where Avery now held court like a Netflix queen. He wasn't leading anymore. She was, or she thought she was. And here's the kicker, I let it happen, not because I was weak, but because I thought my work spoke for itself. I thought the system I built, the millions of lines of code, patents, the product market fit, I thought that would insulate me, make me unassailable. I didn't realize I was the frog in the pot. Every efficiency she introduced chipped away at something I'd built. Every new hire came with a whispered, "Don't worry, she won't be here much longer." They weren't even subtle, but I wasn't about to go quietly. I started taking notes, not the kind Avery's consultants scribbled in their branded notebooks. Real notes, code change logs, architecture decision records, emails approving key features, my name on every commit, every contribution timestamped and backed up. I wasn't documenting, I was preserving history. Mine, because somewhere deep down I knew a storm was coming, and when it hit, I didn't plan to cower under Avery's mood boards. I planned to flip the whole damn table. The day Avery got her nameplate, something shifted. It wasn't the title. Chief Vision Officer was as made up as her eyelash extensions, but the way people looked at her. Suddenly, she was no longer the founder's kid who microwaved salmon in the break room. Now she was floating through hallways in silk blouses, tossing around phrases like user journey mapping and paradigm shift like confetti, with a shadow of consultants flanking her like backup dancers. I remember standing in line at the espresso machine when I first saw the plaque on her office door. Avery Carlisle CVO. It had gold lettering and everything. I blinked. We'd never even had a CMO, let alone someone in charge of vision. The consultants arrived the next day. They looked like they'd been birthed from a branding agency's womb. Square glasses, ironic beards, and energy that screamed, I once gave a TEDx talk about fonts. They held meetings with titles like Vision Architecture Alignment and Optimizing Narrative Pathways. They asked invasive questions like, what does Melissa mean to the product journey? With their heads tilted like sociopathic parrots. I answered their questions, politely, succinctly. Then I went back to writing the actual code that kept our product breathing. That's when things got weird. Budget approvals started skipping my desk. I'd been the technical check for years. Nothing rolled into dev without my sign-off. But one morning, I opened our internal dashboard and saw a $64,000 invoice pushed through for UX aesthetic overhaul by a vendor I'd never heard of. I messaged our ops lead Josh, me, who greenlit this. Josh, thought it was you. Nope, it wasn't. I checked the logs. Guess who clicked approve? Avery, using her shiny new exec badge. When I brought it up to her directly, calmly, in a Slack DM, she replied with, vision alignment is part of our leadership priorities now. Hope that makes sense. And added a star emoji, a star, as if she'd just told me I won Employee of the Month for keeping my mouth shut. Later that week, the founder pulled me aside. Don't worry, Mel, he said, clapping me on the shoulder like a man who'd read a LinkedIn article on servant leadership. Avery's just bringing in fresh perspectives. The consultants are temporary. Let her play around. You know the real stuff runs through you. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the real stuff, it was slipping through my fingers like sand. And he didn't seem to notice, or worse, didn't care. Then came the project proposal. It was a new module, something I'd prototyped in my off hours, a feature request we'd been kicking around for months but couldn't greenlight due to bandwidth. I opened the shared doc to find a 42-page PDF outlining my architecture. Only it wasn't mine anymore. The cover page listed Carly as the lead. I wasn't even mentioned. Not in the team credits, not in the source citations. Nowhere. I stared at it for a long time, my coffee cooling beside me, pulse in my ears. I checked the edit history. The original draft was mine. The same file I'd shared in Slack weeks ago. Just copied, renamed, and stripped of me. My initials were still hidden deep in the comment threads like forensic fingerprints, but the narrative had been rewritten. Carly, with her flair pens and performative competence, was now the face of the project. I didn't confront her or Avery, not yet. I saved a copy, downloaded the original threads, documented the commit trail. Quietly, methodically, I began building a separate folder, my insurance policy. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I smiled through meetings, nodded at Avery's buzzword bingo, and pretended not to notice when I was left off the invite list for the product roadmap offsite. But inside, something was calcifying. I wasn't being overlooked anymore. I was being erased. An erasure, I've found, is just another word for war. It started with a spreadsheet. Subject line, efficiency visibility audit action required. The email came from Avery's new chief of staff, a man named Dean who wore loafers without socks and called everyone my dude, including the cleaning staff. Attached was a color-coded template labeled individual contribution matrix, as if we were cogs in a Six Sigma factory, instead of the technical team that had carried this company on our backs since it was 3 pizza boxes and a dream. They wanted us to list our weekly tasks, categorize them, quantify impact in business value units. I wish I were joking. Dean followed up in Slack 5 minutes later with, let's lean into radical transparency, folks. If your work is vital, it'll shine. That sentence right there, that's when I knew the knives were out. I'd seen this movie before. Call it an audit, call it a matrix, call it a culture reset, it all meant the same thing. Someone was getting cut, and they wanted a paper trail to make it look like strategy instead of sabotage. I'd watched them pull the same move on our support team 6 months ago. One week it was streamlining tier escalation, the next it was cardboard boxes and non-disclosure agreements, so I played along. I filled out the spreadsheet. Every task, every project, every bug ticket. I made it so dry, so clinical, it read like it had been spat out of a printer at Deloitte. But behind the scenes, I was building something else. My own audit. See, when you work in tech long enough, you learn that the version control system is your memory. Git doesn't lie. Every commit, every branch, every pull request, I started cataloging it, downloading backups, cross-referencing with Jira tickets, linking my contributions to each feature we launched, each client win we bragged about in pitch decks. I printed out the IP origination forms I'd signed in year 1, dug up the original architecture diagrams with my signature at the bottom, and backed up the folder 3 different ways. Encrypted USB, private cloud, and 1 copy sent to an old Gmail address under a fake name I used to use for fantasy football. Call it paranoia. I call it insurance. Meanwhile, the company Slack turned into a haunted house of nervous emojis. Whole teams were being repositioned. The data science team went from 10 people to 2 in a week. DevOps got folded into product with no explanation. Our senior mobile engineer was suddenly reporting to someone in marketing who once asked if iOS was open source. When I asked why my own direct reports were showing up under someone else's Jira tree, I got a DM from Dean. Hey Melissa, just shifting some reporting lines for visibility. Nothing to worry about. That smiley face nearly sent me into orbit. The founder, remember him? Avery's dad stopped coming into the office. He used to show up with cold brew and half-baked ideas. Now he just phoned into exec stand-ups, said vague things about trusting new leadership, and logged off before questions hit. And Avery, she strutted around like a conquering queen. She wore suits now, carried a leather-bound notebook she never wrote in, started using phrases like we're evolving past product-centric thinking and let's talk vision economics. She even changed her Slack status to Lightbulb, taking point on InvestorCom's briefcase that last one hit different. Investor calls were sacred. In this company, they were the lifeline. We were still pre-profit, pre-acquisition. Everything we had, our office, our salaries, our overpriced kombucha fridge, was riding on those monthly check-ins with the people who actually paid the bills. And she was taking point? I stared at her status for a long time, sipping black coffee that tasted like resentment. That's when I opened the founder's agreement again. The one from the seed round. I still had a PDF. I'd helped draft it back when lawyers were optional and everyone signed things at 1 a.m. over cheap beer. Page 6. Paragraph 12. Technical founder shall retain voting and veto rights pertaining to any structural equity change, including cap table amendments, investor term modifications, or dilution events, unless and until rights are formally reassigned via board vote and mutual consent. I read it twice. Then I bookmarked it. I wasn't just building a backup anymore. I was building a trigger. They wanted efficiency? Let's talk efficient exits. Avery summoned me via calendar invite. No subject line, just one quick sync with a 15-minute slot squeezed between wellness culture brief and her daily influencer content review. I accepted without replying. No point. I walked into her office at precisely 9 a.m. She didn't look up from her phone. Hey, Mel, she said like we were brunching, not bleeding out. There was a pause. She didn't offer a chair. Then she launched into it, voice syrupy with weaponized empathy. I wanted to have this conversation face to face, woman to woman. It's not easy, but I think we're both mature enough to handle change with grace. I said nothing. Let the silence stretch like barbed wire between us. She twirled her pen, some designer thing with a crystal in the cap, and exhaled dramatically. So, we've been doing a lot of thinking at the leadership level. And honestly, the org has evolved. Your technical role has kind of matured past the scope of where we're headed. I blinked, matured, right, like it's legacy. Not in a bad way, it's just foundational. You were amazing at the beginning, building scaffolding and all that, but we're not scaffolding anymore. We're architecture now, you feel me? I stared at her for a beat. This is a termination conversation. She flinched just slightly. It's a transition conversation. HR will follow up with the official stuff. I just thought it deserved a more human touch. I didn't move, didn't speak. Let her squirm in her own compostable office chair. Finally, I nodded once. Got it. As I turned to leave, she added, this isn't personal. You should know that. I paused in the doorway, looked back. Everything that builds the product was personal to me. That's why it worked. And then I left. By the time I returned to my desk, there was an HR calendar block waiting in my inbox. Melissa termination logistics 30 min, sent with read receipt enabled. Brave. I didn't attend it. Instead, I went home. I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and started digging. There's something primal about betrayal, something that strips the varnish off memory. I remembered the legal pad I'd scribbled on with the founder, year one, drafting what would become the founding documents. I remembered sitting on his porch while he explained the importance of founder roles, how investors like technical founders on paper even if they rarely appear in the spotlight. I still had that PDF, the amended Articles of Incorporation series of financing, buried in an old Dropbox folder under a subfolder called Don't Delete Ever. I opened it. It all came rushing back. Clause 14b, page 9. In the event that the technical founder is involuntarily removed, terminated, or reassigned without consent, any modifications to company structure, equity distribution, or financing rounds shall require explicit written approval from said technical founder or a majority vote from founding board members. This clause is irrevocable unless mutually nullified in writing. I sat back, heart thudding, not with fear but with something harder. Colder, recognition. They'd forgotten, or more likely, they never read it. Avery had come in like a wrecking ball with pastel PowerPoints and a fake title, thinking leadership meant deleting the past. She didn't realize the past had teeth, and I'd sharpened mine. I cross-checked the clause against my records. It had never been revoked, never amended. The board had changed, yes, but that clause had not. And they'd just removed me on paper without consent. My hand trembled just slightly as I closed the laptop. Not because I was scared, because I knew exactly what was coming. Avery thought she'd won. Thought optics and Slack emojis and strategy huddles were power, but I still held the kill switch, and I was done waiting. The investor calls used to be sacred. Cameras on, mics muted unless summoned, and only the founder spoke unless someone was bleeding money or code. Now, it looked like a reality show. Avery had hijacked it. The backdrop behind her was ridiculous. One of those staged home offices with fake books and a neon sign that said do the work. She wore a blazer 2 sizes too big and smiled like a real estate agent about to upsell a haunted house. To her right, the founder sat off-center, visibly disengaged, sipping from a mug that definitely didn't hold coffee. I stayed muted, camera off in the lower corner of the Zoom panel. Anonymous. Unseen. Not a name they recognized, unless they'd actually read the series of paperwork. Avery kicked things off with her usual TED-light nonsense. We've been deep in efficiency mode this quarter, really sharpening our operational edges and aligning with our strategic core values. She said aligning twice in the same sentence. I watched one of the older VCs wince like he'd bit down on tinfoil. There were charts, so many charts, slide after slide of agile synergies and cultural optimization vectors, none of which explained why our roadmap was months behind or why half the senior engineers were missing from this call. And then she dropped the bomb. In that spirit of alignment, she chirped, voice like lacquered pine, "We've made a few bold, future-facing shifts. One of those is the streamlining of legacy roles. So, as of this week, we've sunsetted Melissa's position to make space for new operational agility in our tech leadership. Sunsetted, like I was a product feature past its prime. No one spoke, not even the founder. He blinked slowly, gaze fixed somewhere off-screen, as if watching his company become unrecognizable in real time. My mic stayed off. My camera stayed dark. Avery beamed. "We're thrilled about what this means for velocity going forward. Our consultants have helped reimagine the product lifecycle, and we're excited for Series B scalability now that we've shed some of the structural lag." I could have exploded, could have unmuted and burned it all down live in front of the board. But I didn't. Instead, I unmuted with perfect timing, just as Avery was moving to the next topic. "Thanks for the transparency," I said evenly. "I'll make sure legal has everything they need to update the cap table." Dead silence. Avery's smile cracked just slightly. Her hand hovered near the trackpad like she wasn't sure whether to mute me or block me altogether. One of the investors, a thin man with a habit of tapping his pen against his cheek, froze mid-motion, then scribbled something. Slowly, deliberately, the founder finally shifted. He looked up, then looked at Avery. Nobody said a word. I clicked leave meeting and closed my laptop with a calmness I didn't feel. Then I sat back in my chair. The one they'd tried to erase, and stared out the window of my apartment as traffic hummed below. It was done. They had made their move, publicly, on record, and now I would make mine, not with noise, not with Slack rants or HR tantrums, with paper, with ink, with the clause they forgot to read but I never stopped guarding. Because the thing about bombs is they don't need to be loud when they land. They just need to be timed right, and mine was ticking. The next morning, Avery floated into the office like she'd just been crowned. Hair blown out, heels clacking like war drums, and that smug upward tilt of her chin that said, "I won." She passed by the engineering pit with a box of artisanal donuts, one of her new culture rituals, and dropped them onto the breakroom table like an offering. "Sugar for synergy," she chirped. Nobody laughed, but that didn't stop her from twirling around and retreating into her glass-walled throne room. I noticed someone had added a tiny plaque to her door. "Avery Carlisle, co-founder and CVO, co-founder." I stared at it so long I forgot I was holding my coffee until it went cold in my hand. By noon, Slack was a fireworks display of forced celebration. Kudos to Avery for decisive leadership during a difficult pivot. Thrilled to be part of this next chapter. Feeling so aligned, most of the comments came from people with consultant in their titles, or those who had attached their wagons to her rocket since the day she arrived. One junior designer even posted a selfie holding a latte with #Team Avery in foam art. I didn't respond. I just read, archived, noted names. The press release hit around 2:00 p.m. Glossy and shallow, published on one of those startup PR mills with more sizzle than substance. The headline made my jaw tighten. Avery Carlisle promoted to co-founder in strategic restructure aimed at growth and vision leadership. I read it twice. Then a third time, there it was in black and white. Avery Carlisle, recently named co-founder, will lead upcoming investor engagement and spearhead product evolution. No mention of me, no correction, no truth. She'd rewritten history, not just mine, the company's. By 3:00 p.m., I received the official notice. A cold little PDF from HR titled, "Termination Confirmation Melissa Hartley." I opened it slowly, like peeling back a bandage. The language was sterile, stuffed with per compliance and per our internal restructuring process, but one sentence made my fingers tighten on the mouse. "We confirm that your employment with the company, originally commenced as an early employee on June 1, 2016, has been formally terminated as of early employee." I wasn't an employee when I started. I was the technical founder. The person who built the technical infrastructure. The one who signed the damn incorporation documents while Avery was still posting dorm room selfies. They didn't just erase me. They were trying to rewrite me as something I never was, just another warm body who used to work here. I stared at the screen for a moment too long, breathing like I'd just come up from underwater. Then I stood up, walked to the window, and counted 5 taxis before I turned back to the desk and opened my archive. I scrolled past old pitch decks, legal templates, dated email threads, then I found it. Cap Table Series A signed final PDF click. Next to the founder's name, 2 lines down, Melissa Hartley, technical founder, 10% initial equity, voting rights attached. Then another doc, series a term sheet, founder's clause, veto rights. I'd forgotten how direct it was. Not written in legalese, not buried in jargon. Just plain and ironclad. In the event of involuntary removal of the technical founder without formal reassignment of role or equity adjustment, all structural modifications to funding, board appointments, or ownership shall be subject to founder veto per clause 12C. I forwarded both documents to my lawyer with a short note. "Let me know when you've reviewed. I think it's time we reminded them what they signed." 1 hour later, she replied, reviewed, solid, and hilariously overlooked. Do you want to send them a courtesy flag before I reach out to opposing counsel? I typed back, no. Let them keep celebrating, because that's the thing about false victories. They make people loud, careless, overconfident. And the higher Avery climbed on her paper crown, the harder the fall would be when gravity came knocking, with a clause, a signature, and a timestamp they couldn't erase. The next investor call was scheduled for Thursday at 11 o'clock a.m., sharp. But at 10:58, you could already feel the tension bleeding through the Zoom grid. Most of the usual smiles were missing. Cameras on, but no one speaking. Avery sat dead center, flanked by Dean and two consultants dressed like they'd been AI-generated for a stock photo. The founder was off camera, his black square labeled Michael Founder, mic muted. I logged in under a generic guest account, audio only. No one needed to see my face, not yet. Avery kicked it off the way she always did, overconfident and over-rehearsed. Good morning, everyone. Before we jump in, I want to acknowledge what an exciting quarter we've had. The structural realignment complete and our executive team optimized. We're positioned to accelerate Series B with a leaner, more agile framework. She went on like that for a while. Buzzwords on buzzwords. I half listened, half watched her performance. The same clipped cadence, the same smug little smirk every time a slide changed. This time, though, the investors weren't nodding. They weren't smiling. They weren't even blinking. That's when Peter, lead investor, primary check writer, and the only person on the call who once asked a real question about infrastructure, cleared his throat. Avery, he said, leaning slightly into his camera, before we proceed with today's financial approvals, I have a quick question. She straightened, of course. Peter tapped something on his desk. Then, casually, who signed as technical founder on the original series of documents? Dead silence. Avery blinked, smiled too fast. I'm sorry, who signed as technical founder? Legal flinched visibly in his window. The junior associate next to him began furiously scrolling on a second monitor. Dean leaned toward Avery, whispering something off mic. Avery tried to keep the grin alive, but it had cracked at the edges. I believe that would have been Melissa Hartley, but as you know, she was an early-stage contributor. We've since restructured her role. Peter cut her off. You fired her. It wasn't a question. It was a fact. Dropped like a lead weight. Avery's smile evaporated completely. We sunsetted her position as part of a strategic shift. Peter said, eyes narrowing. You do realize that the original term sheet included technical founder veto, rights tied to financing events, correct? More silence. The kind that doesn't happen in normal meetings. The kind that makes people sweat. One of the other VCs muted himself mid-cough. Another minimized his camera entirely. Peter tapped again, louder this time. I've reviewed the clause, and unless I'm mistaken, no Series B can proceed without her written approval. That includes valuation adjustments, equity allocations, and cap table changes. Dean whispered louder now. I saw legal hold up his hands as if to say, give me a second. Avery finally spoke. Peter, we were under the impression that Melissa's departure nullified those provisions. She was no longer active in the company. And yet, Peter said, voice now cold, you issued a press release naming yourself as co-founder, while failing to notify us that the actual technical founder, with legal veto power over this very round, was removed without board vote or equity reassignment. Avery went pale. Someone exhaled audibly on the call. From my end, I said nothing. Just leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling while listening to the unraveling. Peter continued, we'll need to pause any movement on Series B until this is resolved. I'll be requesting a formal review of all recent executive decisions and press statements. Legal, he turned slightly to his right, you'll be coordinating with Melissa's counsel moving forward. Avery looked like she'd been slapped in slow motion. Still off mic, still off camera, I smiled. Not big, just enough. They'd finally read the contract. The clock had struck clause. By Friday, the wheels had come off. The Series B deck, carefully crafted, color-coded, filled with Avery's smiling headshots and graphs pointing skyward, was pulled offline by noon. The shared folder read, access revoked by legal ops. Dean pinged people in Slack with frantic messages like, does anyone have a version saved? And let's not panic, just pivot, but everyone knew. The panic had already arrived in full business casual attire. I wasn't in the building, but I didn't need to be. Chaos has a signature scent, it seeps through subject lines and CCs. I could smell it from my couch. At 3:47 p.m., a board-wide memo leaked. Emergency session scheduled, cap table discrepancy and founder's clause review. I wasn't on the invite list, but two people forwarded it to me independently with variations of holy shit. One even added a popcorn emoji. I opened my laptop and did nothing. Let the theater unfold. That evening, Avery's name disappeared from the company website's leadership page, quietly without comment. The cached version still showed her next to the founder, beaming, confident, untouched by reality, but the live version had shifted. Now, only Michael's face remained, that tired, haunted expression of a man who handed the steering wheel to his daughter and woke up in a ditch. Then came the Slack mutiny. #strategy huddle was locked. #vision board deleted. A new channel popped up, #company updates, run exclusively by legal and ops. The first message was pinned. Pending legal clarification, all strategic communications are paused until further notice. Please refrain from external outreach. Avery didn't post once. I'm told she stormed out of the office that afternoon, ripped her nameplate off the door, shouted something about toxic jealousy, and slammed her laptop shut in front of an intern. The laptop now sat boxed on HR's desk. Her keycard was deactivated within the hour. My inbox lit up at 6:12 p.m. Subject, open door next steps discussion from Michael Carlisle. Melissa, I understand things have been complicated. The board is currently reviewing all structural options. Would you consider a conversation about reinstatement? Your experience is deeply valued. Warmly. Michael, I didn't reply. Instead, I closed the email and opened the most recent memo from VC Legal that had been forwarded, unofficially of course. It read, as per Clause 12C of the Series of Agreement, no further equity modifications, funding authorizations, or board appointments may be executed without written consent from the named technical founder, Melissa Hartley. This includes pending Series B disbursement. All participating investors have been advised accordingly. That was it. That was the sentence that locked the vault. I wasn't just a ghost haunting their cap table anymore. I was the key holder, the bottleneck, the clause they couldn't bypass without crawling, and everyone knew it now. I could feel the shift, not just in power, but in posture. The same people who'd smiled through my erasure, who clapped when Avery sunsetted my role, were now scrambling to undo it, as if my consent could be printed on letterhead like nothing had happened, as if I'd forgotten. They thought silence meant surrender, but I had never surrendered. I had simply waited, and now the company was frozen. Every decision, every dollar, every dream, all of it tethered to a name they tried to erase. Mine. The final financing session was scheduled for Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. The kind of call that normally comes with champagne chilled in someone's breakroom fridge, and an intern hovering off camera to take notes for the victory blog post. But this one had no celebration energy. The investors were tense. The founder looked 10 years older. His square on the call showed him in a stiff button-down, eyes sunken, lips pressed in a permanent line. No Avery in sight, no Dean. Just legal, arms crossed, flanked by the firm's CFO, whose expression suggested she'd aged 3 fiscal years in the last week. They tried to keep it upbeat at first. Walked through projections, rehashed retention metrics, flashed slide decks as if facts could unburn a building. But the oxygen wasn't there. Everyone was waiting for one thing, and it came right on cue. Peter, the lead VC, now very much the only voice that mattered, adjusted his glasses and said, before we finalize, we'll need confirmation on one outstanding item. The founder cleared his throat. Of course. Peter nodded toward the bottom corner of the screen. Melissa, I clicked my mic on. My camera stayed off. Here, he leaned forward. Do you approve this round as presented, including all current executive titles and equity designations? There it was, the moment, the final pin in the grenade. I didn't hesitate. No, I said. Not while Avery Carlisle holds any title, stake, or influence within this company. My veto stands. Silence. Real, actual silence. Not a sound from legal, not from the founder. Just the faint, hollow echo of someone muting themselves in the background. Then Peter leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers, and said, understood. We'll consider the matter unresolved. No funds will be released until structural revisions are made in line with Clause 12C. Click, the call ended just like that. No shouting, no drama, just a quiet unraveling of their plan, thread by legal thread. 2 weeks later, a formal announcement was posted on the company's LinkedIn page. Michael Carlisle, our esteemed founder, is stepping down to pursue new ventures. We thank him for his years of service and vision. No mention of Avery, but buried 3 lines down was this. Interim leadership will consult with original technical founder, Melissa Hartley, as strategic advisor during the transition. That same day, someone forwarded me an internal Slack screenshot. Avery had messaged, it's not a resignation if you were never actually fired, right? Followed by a broken heart emoji. An hour later, her name disappeared from the company directory, quiet as a deleted Google Doc. I never replied to Michael's second email. I didn't need to. Instead, I moved into my new office, same city, new building, one with real light and no glass fishbowls pretending to be collaboration. On the wall behind my desk, a simple brushed metal plaque. Melissa Hartley, founder, CTO, advisor, no adjectives, no hashtags, just truth. People think revenge has to be messy, public, loud, but I didn't fight dirty. I didn't smear anyone. I didn't even raise my voice. I just read what they signed. And then I let the paper do the talking. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.